Welcome to the HerbWorks podcast featuring Roger Drummer, the formulator at HerbWorks.com. An educator in the field of nutrition and Chinese herbalism, Roger has a unique ability to keep things simple by taking all the guesswork out of complicated health issues. HerbWorks is committed to helping you improve your health and enhance your life through herbs and common sense.
Hello, everyone. All right, Mr. Drummer, what are we talking about today?
Roger's keto cancer diet. Well, everybody's been asking me, what did you actually eat?
All
and
right.
How did it work? So,
right. We'll preface that by saying that you had cancer and you're now cancer-free.
Yes. Well, today I want to talk about why I did the ketogenic diet, what that all entailed, intermittent fasting, kind of explain that to people, the type of food I actually ate, and how I figured out what types of food to eat, what to avoid, and then the timing of it all, because people are confused. I have all kinds of people asking me now, like my neighbors wanted to know if I could teach them the ketogenic diet. And so basically I want to go over the whole concept, what I actually did, so people kind of understand it.
All right, so you were diagnosed with stage 3 bladder cancer, and you chose to approach it by using this ketogenic diet to alter the cancer. What's the theory behind that? Why choose the ketogenic diet?
Well, I did some research, and with cancer, by the way, I have to say this, almost everybody just goes into eat raw food, juice, all these different things. And they talk about the anti-cancer properties in foods. Well, every vegetable and fruit has some anti-cancer property. Doesn't mean that when you eat a bunch of them that it'll kill your cancer. I didn't feel comfortable with that, just juicing or eating clean food, because I basically ate clean food almost all the time, right? I've been doing it for years. I didn't think just a 10% change in my diet was going to radically affect my cancer. So I read about the ketogenic diet. It instantly made sense to me. But the other big thing was that I had already known something about it because a friend of mine had used it, and he had a type of brain cancer where he wasn't expected to live for more than 3 to 6 months, and it was 5 years later
that he was living, and he was following this medical ketosis.
So he just suggested I try it, and I read a book called Tripping Over the Truth, and it explained the whole idea of cancer. And it turns out the ketogenic diet for cancer was based on a guy who won a Nobel Prize in 1930, I think it was, Otto Warburg, who proved that his theory was that cancer has a disturbed metabolism. Its mitochondria switches over to only being able to use fermented glucose as an energy source. And that's what it was, his Nobel Prize that he got in medicine that year was based on. And so the ketogenic diet comes out of that, and basically it's about looking at how your cancer cells metabolize energy and then shutting off that source. Because a cancer cell, once it becomes cancerous, the mitochondria, which is kind of where it makes all its energy in the cell, expresses a new DNA, and that DNA says, I can only eat fermented glucose. And because the cell's damaged, it doesn't work real well. It requires 18 times more glucose than a normal cell. So the ketogenic diet really is the theory of, well, if that's what it takes to eat it, I'm going to starve it completely of any glucose, sugar source, right? And run off ketones, which is where the word ketosis, ketogenic diet comes from. Ketone is a water-soluble fat that your liver can make out of your fat cells or stored energy, the breakdown of stored energy. And this is kind of how it used to happen, 100 to 1,000 years ago. If you were starving, your body went into ketosis. It would take your stored energy, turn it into a ketone, and keep your brain alive and your heart until you found some food. Well, now we know enough about nutrition that we can stimulate that on our own. We can pull the tricks out of the hat so much that we can make our body go into ketosis. And then the idea is run off ketones, starve your cancer of sugar, and see what happens to it. What used to be, though, when this diet was tried back in the 60s, people hated it because they didn't have all the stuff we have today. They didn't have MCT oil. They didn't have these synthetic beta-hydroxybutyrate powders that they could take to raise ketones. They just starved people, 600 calories a day. And they proved they could get rid of a lot of cancers. They could help treat cancers, but everybody just got so sick of being starved physically that they gave up, after a while. And they went back to eating, and so it didn't really work long term.
All right, so the idea of this ketogenic anti-cancer diet is starving the cancer from its food source, which is glucose. Fermented glucose. So you're going to be obviously messing with your blood sugar levels is what my guess is.
Right.
Okay. So that being said, I mean, you're a healthy person. You've eaten organic, whole foods, vegetarian diet for 30 years.
Yes.
So this diet must have been very different as far as what it did to your body, because you got cancer and yet you had, for the last 30 years, no risk of it, in the sense that you're not obese, you're not smoking, you're not drinking, you're eating organic food, you have this very healthy lifestyle, and yet cancer appears.
Well, the thing, most people, cancer is very misunderstood. People just don't understand how you get it. They think if you got cancer, it's like it showed up yesterday, so it started forming the week before or something.
Kind of like a virus.
It's like my doctor told me, he goes, you could have got this back when you were 19 years old, when you were exposed to a lot of pesticides on the farm, because bladder cancer is usually pesticides, cigarette smoking, right? Mm-hmm. He goes, you smoked cigarettes at the same time. You did it for a lot for a very short period of time, but you were still exposed. You could have started it then, and sometimes cancer takes 20 years to show up.
Wow.
He goes, you got into a health kick. He goes, so maybe you were so healthy that it just grew so slow that it finally showed up. It finally showed up at the stage that it was in. Today we just want to kind of give you an idea of what I did and how I kind of proceeded with this. And the one thing I want to say up front, so that everybody knows this, is that I went through a process with the ketogenic diet, but I also did a special meditation that I added into my program. I also did an herb program. I'm not going to cover those two things. I'm going to cover the diet. But the interesting thing was, like, a year after I did the diet, and I got rid of my cancer in less than 2 months, right? And which is almost miraculous because they can't figure out how I did that. But as I look back on it, I made all kinds of mistakes. I did all kinds of things I wouldn't do today, And so you don't have to be perfect with this. The main thing is that you check your level of ketones and your blood sugar, and you get in the zone. Whether you're making mistakes or you're following the textbook or whatever you're doing, as long as you're in the zone, nobody cares. I do think it is the perfect diet for people with cancer. Myself, this is my opinion. And because once you really learn it and get into it, I don't think it's that hard. Especially when you compare it to what you could be doing. All kinds of radiation, chemo, all those things. And the funny thing is, too, is that this diet isn't recommended to replace those things. In fact, most of the research on this diet shows that it complements those things and makes it work better. If you're doing some natural thing or you're doing chemotherapy, radiation, it supports or puts you in a better position to heal from all of them. So,
This podcast is brought to you by HerbWorks, specializing in stress and brain essentials. Check out Roger's other articles and videos at HerbWorks.com. While you're there, take a look at our natural herbal-based product line for energy, stress, immunity, and sleep. Now back to Roger.
So let's talk about the steps of it. What's one of the most important components of this diet? How is it different than just eating an organic whole foods diet?
Well, the main thing is that you're going to switch your metabolism from running on sugar, which is what every single human being runs on, to running off ketones, which is a fat. And you can do that because you're programmed to do that. It's something your body can naturally do because, again, hundreds of thousands of years ago, most people starved for months at a time during the winter or sometime when they were migrating and they didn't have access to food. So to keep your brain alive and your heart alive, your body developed this ability to run off of ketones, which is something that your body takes your stored energy, your stored fat and sugar, and takes it to the liver, turns it into a water-soluble fat called a ketone, and then you start to run on that. And it keeps your brain alive. Your brain really likes it, and your heart, until you find some other food. And once you eat, it switches right back to sugar because you raised your glucose again.
So how do you get your body to make this switch from running on glucose to running on fat, is basically what you're saying?
I was lucky in the regard that I had already switched my diet to a lot of the new information coming out on nutrition was that fat was one of the best things you could ever eat. So I had already switched for a few months to a high-fat diet. I didn't eat a lot of carbs. I was one of these guys that in the evening I might have some quinoa and different things like that. If I ate a bread, it was rare. It was a gluten-free bread, but I didn't like it that much. But, I have to have it with some eggs once in a while. And I was eating a lot of avocados, nuts, fats, I ate a lot of coconut oil. So when I looked at the ketogenic diet, it basically was me just switching things up maybe 10 to 15%. It wasn't a big leap for me, right? But the key was I had to get into ketosis. And so there was a few steps I had to do to get into ketosis. The first step is that you realize I had to understand what intermittent fasting was, right?
Intermittent fasting.
Intermittent fasting. I had heard about it. I knew that it promoted longevity. All the studies they ever did on animals showed that if they were fasting for a short period of time every day, they tend to live longer, they were healthier, all these different things. And so instead of doing prolonged fasting, they came up with this idea of intermittent, which basically meant you didn't eat for a period of time every day of at least 12 hours. And that's an important number, 12, and I'll get back to that. But for me, with the cancer, it was more important that I go farther. So I got into just almost every single day I didn't eat for 18 hours.
Why so long? Why, if 12 is the magic number, why wait till 18?
Well, 12 starts a process, right? But I wanted to go a little beyond the process. The 12 means that your body now recognizes there hasn't been any food for 12 hours, and it's going to start a process called autophagy. And autophagy is a natural process that your body does when it hasn't had food for a long time. It goes looking for damaged cells, diseased cells, and it kills them off and eats them and just processes them. Once you go into ketosis, you feel differently and you don't feel like you're deprived. And here's the other thing that was very interesting is that because now we use MCT oil. MCT oil, in case you're not familiar with it, is a fraction of coconut oil. It's a medium chain triglyceride. Now you can buy these things. This is so different from the 60s, which was hard to get into ketosis. Today, you can just get on the internet and order MCT oil, and you can order really highly refined stuff that you drink it, and within an hour or two, your ketones start rising. And so every morning, I would wait at least 12 hours before I drank anything but water. And then the first thing I drank was something that had fat in it. And it could only have a few different fats, either coconut oil, MCT oil, or grass-fed butter. It not only gives you some calories to burn, but that mixture does not trigger a hormone release by your body. And that's important because once you trigger the hormone release, which is insulin usually, then you move out of ketosis, or you move out of this stage where you're fasting, right? The fat won't do anything to you. So I might have a cup of that. I'd make it either in coffee which it was funny, I didn't drink coffee before I get cancer, or I'd have it in tea, depending on what I felt like drinking. So I'd mix it up, shake it up so it was mixed real well, and drink it. And that would give me some energy, but it also would raise my ketone level. And that's really important in this whole process. So every day, 18 hours of fasting, do things or drink things to raise my level of ketones. Here's the whole thing with starving your cancer in the ketogenic diet. You have to lower your sugar and raise your ketones high enough that you're running on that as fuel so that your body doesn't respond with insulin or use sugar. And then if your insulin is not activating at all, there's no way for sugar to get into a cancer cell. Your cells are literally starving to death. But you can feel really good because your ketones are high. Almost everybody that ever asked me, the second question is, do I have to eat a lot of meat? And I go, no, I never ate any meat the whole time.
Because you're a vegetarian. Well, you eat fish.
When I started the diet, I only ate eggs. About a month or so into it, I felt a little tired and I thought I needed some fish, and I added fish to it. And the fish made me feel pretty good. So I had that, at least 4 times a week. And I thought it made me feel more vital and up, but I never ate any meat. And here's the other thing on ketosis. You limit your protein. I limited my first meal to 25 grams of protein, my dinner to 25 grams of protein. In between, I got some protein from nuts and different variant things that all have a little bit in it. But as far as having a chunk at one time, it was 25 grams twice a day, because if you overconsume protein, your body just makes sugar out of it.
All right,
so you have to avoid that.
What are some high-quality sources of protein? What would 25 grams of that look like?
25 grams of protein is 4 eggs.
Or
a can of sardines. Or a can of tuna, which I didn't eat a lot of because it's high in mercury. But, once a week you could have that.
A piece of fish the size of your hand, your palm.
Piece of fish about the size of your palm, about the size of a hamburger, basically.
Okay. How much nuts is 25 grams of protein? What kind of nuts?
Well,
handful of almonds, handful of...
You probably only want to eat a handful at a time. At the beginning, I ate a lot of pecans. I love pecans. And then I ate a lot of Brazil nuts. And then I got into raw walnuts.
You are a nut.
I loved it. But, I avoided peanuts. You don't want to eat peanuts because it's not the right type of omega-3s, and it's more omega-6s. And that's what I basically stuck to.
All right, so plant foods, what are those going to be?
Plant foods, you want to look up. What I did was I went and researched cancer, and there was this whole movement. There was a guy who gave a TED Talk on angiogenesis. And in fact, if you're not familiar with that, angiogenesis is the process by which a tumor starts growing and it knows it needs its own blood supply. So it sends out its own feelers, and all of a sudden it has its own little circulation and capillaries and everything that's going to bring it blood to grow, right? And so there's certain foods and certain herbs that are anti-angiogenic. So the interesting thing was that all the foods that are anti-angiogenic are also low glycemic, and they also fit right into the ketogenic diet. There's really no difference to it. Everything that's listed as low glycemic, there's things like celery and zucchini and chard and broccoli and kale and all the leafy greens and salads. So you kind of get the idea, you make a list, and then that just becomes your diet. Just don't vary from it. And
what about root vegetables like carrots, potatoes, beets?
Never ate any potatoes. Potatoes are too high glycemic. Carrots once in a while just because they taste really good. But I'm eating them. I'm not juicing anything because juice makes your sugar go up too quickly, right? So a carrot once in a while, but I didn't live on that. I stuck to, and this is the fascinating thing. When I got into it, before I started the ketogenic diet, I was juicing a bit. But with juicing, you're just kind of thinking, I hope I'm killing something, right? With the ketogenic diet, I really thought I was making an impact, and it gave me some sort of control. So I just stuck to this diet. Every day for breakfast, let's say at noon or so, I had usually eggs because I love eggs. And I would have a huge pile of kale or chard or broccoli, whatever it was, and an avocado. And that was just my typical breakfast every day. I really liked that breakfast, right? And it filled me up, and I never got tired of it. But the point I wanted to make about the juicing and then going ketogenic was that I realized one day I had to give up the idea of having the most nutritious food. Now, I still ate the most nutritious food, but I didn't think that my nutrition was going to kill my cancer. What I thought the most important thing in the diet was that I was regulating my sugar and getting my ketones to go up. So I basically reduced my diet to the protein source, the nuts, vegetables, no fruit, didn't eat any fruit at all, and didn't care because there's sugar in it. And my goal was every day, 3 times a day, I'd measure my blood and my glucose, and I'd get into ketosis. And that's all I really wanted to do. As long as I was in ketosis and I was within the range, what they call the glucose ketone index of 1, right? And I'll explain that just real shortly. It's very, very simple. You measure your blood glucose, right? Let's say it's 72. And I'm going to say that because it's easy to divide by 4. So you, or divide by 18, I'm sorry. You want to divide 72 by 18 because that gives you a metric number, which is what all medicine around the world runs on. So now you got a metric number of 4. You have to divide your level of glucose, 4, by the level of ketones that you have. And you want it to come out to 1. So that means your ketones have to be 4. So every day I'd shoot for below 72 and over 4. And that's basically how I did it. And as long as I was in the zone, I was in the zone.
So what other supplements or what other herbs did you take along with this?
Well, that would be an entire program in and of itself, the complete herb program, because I was taking about 30 capsules at a time, 3 times a day. The thing that really helped me, that launched me into this, was Inner Peace.
That's your formula.
Because if you research Inner Peace, adaptogens are actually used in herbal therapies for cancer. And the reason for that is that it changes not only mainly your stress response, and they all work on inflammation, right? But the main thing is, if you're locked into a stress response, which believe me, you are locked into a stress response when they tell you have cancer, that as long as you're locked into that, your immune system doesn't work, your blood sugar's really high because you're stressed. You're having a stress response. Blood sugar goes way up, fight or flight. I was lost for a good 2 weeks after they told me I had cancer. It's just, the whole dread, the whole, wondering about what's going on. It wasn't until I started taking Inner Peace that my brain flipped out of that energy and I started wanting to research and get into the whole thing. So it was the key to everything, but it also was the key to helping me regulate my sugar every day, because I just switched over to every day, at least twice a day, I took Inner Peace. And it helped me to stay calm. It helped me to just get into what I was doing. It went really well with the rest of my herbs. Because you're now relaxed, your body deals with sugar in a natural way. And your glucose, your glucose is regulated. Everybody that does ketogenic research will tell you, whenever they test their blood sugar, the highest all the time is when they're driving to work, when they just get to work, or when they're answering their emails. That's when it goes up, right? It just naturally goes up. You have an emotional response. So
right. So that Inner Peace was also a really big key for you in managing.
And so then, other than that, I just every day stuck to my diet. And the exciting thing is, there's a couple exciting things about this diet. If you do it right, and, this is a medical ketosis, by the way. It's not just a little bit of ketogenic diet that you might be playing around with. This is the medical version. If you do it right and your ketones go up like at 4 or 5 and your blood sugar's low, you get a really clarity of mind and you feel like you've accomplished something. And the next day you wake up being excited about measuring it again and knowing, and I was actually smiling every morning knowing that I'm in a zone where my cancer cells are not eating anything. And it was just kind of fun to me. I knew I was starving it. Every day I read my numbers and I just go, hey, that's exciting, right? And then I'd play with my other stuff. And I was always, it was easy for me to stay with it because I could track my progress by knowing that chart. and measuring out my stuff. When you have cancer, you pretty much feel helpless because you don't know what's happening inside your body. It's not like you could feel the cells either dying or replicating or growing or whatever. You go to the doctor and you might find out it's worse, or it might find out they think it's better, whatever the markers are, So being at home and measuring that was something that I knew where I was at. And I knew I had put myself in the best position that I could at home on my own to deal with something.
You a measure of control.
Yeah, it was great.
And as I was saying, that is a big part of it, because you can't see the cancer if it's inside of you. You need a microscope, or you need to be opened up or have an MRI or an ultrasound or something else looking inside to see it.
Yeah, you want to be in control of something. And so the diet just helps you establish control.
And the inner peace gives you a measure of spiritual.
Gives me a measure of inner peace.
It certainly did, because, one thing that can happen for people when they're transitioning is you can get low blood sugar cranky.
Yeah, you can, but that's a rarity when you're in ketosis. Now, if your ketones are really low and you're not really in ketosis, your blood sugars, you're going to feel cranky. Normally, what I found out, if I was tired, it's because I didn't eat enough. So, simple solution to that, when I got tired, I ate something. Even though it was low glycemic, low calorie, high fat, I just ate something. I always felt better after that.
So one question I have is, what about people who have difficulty metabolizing fat or have had gallbladder issues in the past? When I look at what you ate, I thought to myself, if I ate that much fat, I'd be as big as a house. Also, my gallbladder just wouldn't handle it.
Well, you process things or metabolize things completely differently when you're in ketosis. You can actually eat more calories than normal and not gain weight. Most people that do this diet and don't have a disease, say they do it to lose weight. But the idea that what I did when I first got into it, I actually ordered a lipase enzyme because I wanted a little help with digesting all the fat. So I took that a couple times a day, and just a fat enzyme, and I really didn't have any problem with it at all. And I think that if you have a gallbladder issue or you're worried about it, you can always buy some enzymes, lipase enzymes, and take it with your food. And
Okay, so
I don't think there's a problem with it.
What would be the difference between this ketogenic diet, specifically for medical ketosis, anti-cancer diet, and losing weight with a ketogenic diet? How would that be different?
Well, it probably, if you're just losing weight, you'd be on a high-fat diet, right? Low carb, more than likely you wouldn't be eating any grains, right? So you'd be losing the foods that cause inflammation, which may cause you to hold on to weight. And then you would probably be just eating high-fat meals, especially your first meal of the day, and a lot of vegetables. So the difference is you wouldn't be measuring your blood glucose every day and measuring your ketones, because you just kind of be winging it, knowing that you're eating a high-fat diet.
Okay, so
and more than likely you'd have somebody that would be alternating during the day, running on a little sugar at certain moments and running on a little fat at certain moments. Your body actually will fluctuate back and forth. Here's what I would suggest. If you're someone who just wants to lose some weight, order a couple books on Amazon, read up on it, and do it, right?
Okay.
Just get into it. The main thing is that you just eat natural, clean food, and you're going to be eating a little more high fat. If you have a medical issue and you want to go into medical ketosis, it's okay to buy some books, but you better hire somebody to help you. I've been in the nutrition field for so long, since the 80s.
That's a really important point.
So it was easy for me to research, to try things out. I'm a formulator. I had a big advantage to doing this. But you know what's the great thing since I did it is it's almost going on 2 years now. It's been an explosion of practitioners. No matter where you live, you can find someone who's a medical practitioner to help you, or a nutritionist to help you get into it and show you all the ropes and fine tune it for you. And then you could go home and do it, and once in a while get help. you can keep getting help and checking in. There's a lot of alternative doctors now that practice the ketogenic diet with natural methods for cancer. There's all kinds of things blossoming all over the country. You just have to get on the net or order a book, and you can do consultations with people. Take advantage of that, because the average person needs that. I was flying in the dark, and it was successful for me, but I had a lot of years of background of healing other people and knowing how things work. And I'm an herbalist, and I really trust herbs. So that was the advantage I had.
And you had inner peace.
I had inner peace. I just want to say to kind of close is that I honestly think for most cancers, this is the perfect diet for someone to go on. The other fascinating thing is that your doctor more than likely doesn't know anything about diet. In fact, most doctors don't care. They just tell you to go home. In fact, the nurses, when I was in the hospital having a biopsy, said, well, the doctors here just tell people to go home and have a milkshake.
Ooh.
Right? Which is feeding cancer sugar directly, right? So you have to do these things on your own. You have to find someone to help you. And besides that, it's a really highly nutritious diet. It's as nutritious as any diet you ever want to be on when you have cancer.
Well, this has been Laura Shakti for the HerbWorks podcast.
And Roger Drummer. So if you want more information, go to HerbWorks.com, and thank you for tuning in to the HerbWorks podcast.